Imagine the largest empire the world had ever seen. Not Rome, not Egypt, not China, Persia. At its height, the Achaemenid Empire controlled over 2 million square miles of territory, 44 nations under one crown. Armies so vast that ancient historians claimed they drank rivers dry as they marched. This was the superpower of the ancient world. And for 200 years, nobody touched it. The Persian king didn't just rule men, he ruled the very idea of civilization. Every monarch on earth either bowed to him, paid him tribute, or feared him enough to stay quiet. Persia wasn't just powerful, it was permanent, untouchable, forever. And then there was Macedonia, a rough, semi-barbaric kingdom on the northern fringe of the Greek world. The kind of place the Persian court would barely bother to notice. To the kind of place that produced soldiers, not scholars, warriors, not kings. And in that kingdom, in 356 BC, a boy was born. His mother told him he was descended from Achilles. His father told him the world wasn't big enough for both of them. And a philosopher named Aristotle sat him down and taught him exactly what the world was made of, so he could take it apart. His name was Alexander, and he didn't just want to challenge Persia, he wanted to erase it. This is Alexander the Great versus the Persian Empire. Before Alexander ever picked up a spear, this war was already personal. To understand why, you have to go back. Way back. 150 years before Alexander was even born, Persia tried to swallow Greece whole. In 490 BC, King Darius I sent an invasion force across the Aegean. His message to the Greeks was simple: submit or be destroyed. The Greeks at Marathon said no, and against every odd imaginable, they won. 10 years later, Darius's son Xerxes came back, and this time he didn't send an army. He sent a civilization, hundreds of thousands of men, a force that made the earth shake beneath it. Xerxes burned Athens to the ground. He torched the Acropolis, the most sacred site in the Greek world. He desecrated temples. He left scorch marks on marble that the Greeks deliberately chose never to repair. They kept those scars visible, and as reminders, as a promise. Greece eventually pushed Persia back, at Salamis, at Plataea, but the wound never closed. For generations, Greek mothers told their children what Persia had done. Greek poets immortalized it. Greek politicians weaponized it. The burning of Athens wasn't just a military event. It was a scar on the Greek soul. Then came Philip II, Alexander's father. Philip was a genius in his own right. He unified the fractured Greek city-states under Macedonian leadership, not through charm, but through sheer political force. He rebuilt the Macedonian army from the ground up into the most lethal military machine the ancient world had ever seen. And he had a dream: a pan-Hellenic crusade against Persia. A united Greek force marching east to avenge Athens and break Persian dominance once and for all. And he never got to live it. In 336 BC, Philip was assassinated at his own daughter's wedding, stabbed by one of his own bodyguards. The reasons are still debated: personal grievance, Persian gold, palace intrigue. But the result was the same. The dream died with him, or so everyone thought. Alexander was 20 years old when he took the throne. His generals expected him to consolidate, to stabilize, to spend years proving himself before even glancing east. Instead, he looked toward Persia. He didn't inherit his father's plan like a piece of furniture. He inherited it like a flame. This wasn't just ambition. This wasn't just strategy. This was a grudge 150 years in the making, and Alexander was done waiting. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander stood at the edge of Europe and looked east. Ahead of him, Asia, Persian territory, the empire his father had dreamed of breaking. Behind him, everything he'd ever known. He was 22 years old. As his ship crossed the Hellespont, Alexander did something that tells you everything about who he was. He threw a spear into the Asian shore. Not a signal, not a military order, a declaration. He was claiming Asia, not by treaty, not by negotiation, but by the ancient right of the spear. He was telling the world and the gods that this land was his to take. Then he went to Troy. While his generals were thinking about supply lines and cavalry formations, Alexander was at the tomb of Achilles, his hero, his ancestor, through his mother's line. He laid a wreath on the grave, stripped off his armor, and ran a ceremonial race around the tomb in the ancient Greek tradition of honoring the dead. His closest companion, Hephaestion, honored the tomb of Patroclus beside him. This wasn't tourism. This was Alexander telling the world exactly what kind of story he believed he was living. Not a military campaign, not a political conquest, an epic, a myth written in real time, in blood and fire across the face of Asia. He genuinely believed he was Achilles reborn. That history had been holding its breath, waiting for him. And the terrifying thing? He was about to prove it. The first real test came fast. A Persian force, cavalry heavy, well-positioned, was waiting on the eastern bank of the Granicus River. They'd chosen the ground carefully. The crossing would slow the Macedonians. The steep far bank would break their formation. The Persians would cut them apart in the water. It was a smart plan. Alexander's senior general Parmenion urged caution. Wait for morning. Cross at dawn. Don't rush this. Alexander looked at him and said, I would be ashamed to let a little river stop me after crossing an ocean to get here. And he charged. What followed was brutal. The Macedonians hit the far bank and ran straight into a wall of Persian steel. This wasn't a battle of formations. It was a melee. Man against man. Blade against blade. Face to face. And Alexander nearly died. A Persian nobleman got close enough to bring his sword down directly onto Alexander's head. The blow cracked his helmet. 1 second later, 1 inch deeper, and the entire conquest ends before it begins. Clytus saved his life, but Alexander didn't flinch. He kept fighting, kept pushing, kept driving his cavalry through the Persian line until it shattered. Granicus wasn't the biggest battle of the campaign, but it was the most important one psychologically. It proved the Persians could bleed. It proved Alexander's instincts worked, and it sent a message echoing across the entire Persian Empire. The boy from Macedonia wasn't a rumor anymore. He was real, and he was coming. 1 year into the campaign, everything changed. Darius III, King of Kings, ruler of the largest empire on earth, decided to stop delegating. He was done sending governors to handle Alexander, done watching his generals lose battles on his behalf. He was going to end this himself. Darius assembled an army that ancient sources numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Modern historians are more conservative, probably 100,000 to 150,000. But even that conservative number dwarfed Alexander's force of around 40,000. The numbers didn't matter to Alexander. They never did. What mattered was the ground. And here, Darius made his first critical mistake. He chose to fight on a narrow coastal plain, squeezed between mountains and the Mediterranean Sea. In open ground, his massive numbers would have been overwhelming. In this bottleneck, they were useless. He'd handed away his greatest advantage without Alexander firing a single arrow. Alexander saw it immediately. He could barely believe his luck. When the fighting began, Alexander did something that defied every military instinct. He didn't hold the line. He attacked, personally, directly, toward Darius. He led his companion cavalry in a thundering oblique charge, smashing through the Persian left flank, driving a wedge deep into the formation, then wheeling inward toward the center, toward the royal chariot, toward the King of Kings himself. And then it happened. Darius ran. The King of Kings, surrounded by his personal guard, his family watching from the rear, turned his chariot and fled the battlefield. His army saw it, and they broke with him. In his desperate flight, Darius left everything behind. All his treasury, his weapons, his royal tent, and his family, his mother, his wife, his daughters, all captured by Alexander. When Alexander saw Darius's mother prostrating herself before Hephaestion by mistake, thinking he was the king, Alexander simply said, "You weren't wrong. He is Alexander, too." He treated the Persian royal family with complete dignity. No humiliation, no cruelty. Because Alexander didn't just want to defeat Persia. He wanted to become it. Issus wasn't the end. Darius was still alive, still raising armies, still King of Kings in name. But after Issus, everyone knew the truth. The war had already been decided. By 330 BC, Alexander had done the unthinkable. Egypt had surrendered without a fight and hailed him as Pharaoh. Babylon had opened its gates. The vast Persian treasury at Susa, wealth beyond any imagination, had fallen into his hands. And now he stood before Persepolis. Persepolis wasn't just a city. It was the soul of the Persian Empire, the ceremonial capital where the King of Kings received tribute from every nation on earth, where the great festivals burned, where the gods of Persia were honored. It was the most powerful symbol of everything Alexander had come to destroy. He let his men loot it. For days, the richest city in the world was stripped bare. Gold, silver, jewels, silks, loaded onto 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels and sent back west. The wealth was so enormous, it almost defied comprehension. And then, the fire. To the magnificent palace of Xerxes, the man who had burned Athens 150 years before, was set ablaze. Whether it was deliberate political theater or a drunken mistake made at a banquet, historians still argue. Some ancient sources blame a woman named Thais, an Athenian courtesan who allegedly dared Alexander to do it, reminding him of what Xerxes had taken from her city. Others say it was cold, calculated symbolism, a final act of revenge on behalf of Greece. Either way, it burned. One of the ancient world's greatest architectural achievements. Gone. And Alexander, by some accounts, watched it burn and almost immediately regretted it. That moment captures everything complicated about this man. He was capable of breathtaking generosity and shocking destruction in the same breath. A liberator and a conqueror. A visionary and a destroyer. The fire at Persepolis didn't just burn a building. It burned away any pretense that this was a clean, righteous war of Greek revenge. It revealed what Alexander was becoming. Something that didn't have a name yet. Darius was still alive. After Issus. After Gaugamela, where Alexander had crushed the second great Persian army in the most decisive battle of the entire campaign, Darius was still running, still clinging to the title of King of Kings, still trying to rally the eastern provinces. Alexander wouldn't let him breathe. He pushed his army at a pace that bordered on inhuman, forced marches through brutal terrain, soldiers collapsing from exhaustion. Alexander himself riding at the front, refusing to slow down. He had to catch Darius before Darius could become a symbol, a legend, a rallying point for everything that still resisted. But someone got there first. Bessus had made a decision. Darius was finished. And whoever removed the old king and claimed the throne might just be able to stop Alexander himself. In the summer of 330 BC, Bessus and his conspirators surrounded Darius's wagon and ran him through with their spears. Then they rode away and left him to die in the road. Alexander's scouts found him first. The King of Kings, ruler of the greatest empire the ancient world had ever known, was dying in a cart on a dirt road, abandoned by his own men, betrayed by his own family. By some accounts, Alexander took off his own cloak and laid it over Darius. He gave him water. He held his hand as he died. Then he stood up and ordered a state funeral. Darius III was buried with full royal honors, as a king of kings deserved. Alexander wept, according to some sources. Whether that's history or legend, the gesture spoke for itself. He wasn't celebrating. He was paying his respects to the man whose empire he had just inherited. And because that's exactly what it was now, his, the Achaemenid Empire, 200 years of Persian power, 44 nations, the most sophisticated political structure the ancient world had ever built, was gone. Not with a heroic last stand, not with a great final battle, but with a dying king on a dusty road, and a young Macedonian kneeling quietly beside him. The war was over, but Alexander's unraveling had only just begun. Here's where the story gets complicated. Alexander didn't just conquer Persia. He absorbed it. He started wearing Persian robes. He adopted Persian court customs. He brought Persian nobles into his inner circle and Persian soldiers into his army. He encouraged his Macedonian officers to marry Persian women, and led by example, marrying Roxana of Bactria himself. He wasn't erasing Persia. He was becoming it, and his men hated every second of it. To the soldiers who had bled across 10,000 miles of desert and mountain for him, this felt like a betrayal. They hadn't conquered Persia to become Persian. They'd done it to prove that Greece was better, that their king was better. Now their king was wearing the enemy's clothes and bowing to the enemy's gods. The cracks split open fast. Tephilotas, son of his most trusted general, was executed for alleged conspiracy. Parmenion himself, despite a lifetime of loyal service, was killed on Alexander's orders shortly after. And Clytus the Black, the man who had saved Alexander's life at Granicus, was murdered by Alexander in a drunken rage after daring to criticize him publicly. Alexander wept for days after killing Clytus, but Clytus was still dead. He tried to introduce proskynesis, the Persian tradition of full prostration before the king, into his Macedonian court. His men refused. In Macedonia, you bowed to gods, not to men. Alexander backed down, but the fact that he'd tried told everyone exactly where his mind had gone. He wasn't the king of Macedonia anymore. He wasn't even the leader of a Greek crusade. And he was building something entirely new. A fusion empire. A world where East and West merged beneath a single ruler who was simultaneously Greek, Macedonian, Egyptian pharaoh, and Persian king. It was a breathtaking vision, and it was destroying him from the inside. The man who had set out to erase Persia had ended up being transformed by it more completely than any Persian sword could have managed. That's what great civilizations do to the people who conquer them. They don't just fall. They fight back, slowly, quietly, through culture, through beauty, through the sheer gravitational pull of their own history. Persia lost the war, but in the end, it won something too. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC. He was 32 years old. No battlefield wound took him, no assassin's blade. He died of fever, or poison, depending on who you believe, after a night of heavy drinking. The greatest conqueror the world had ever seen, brought down by something no army could fight. When they asked him who should inherit his empire, he reportedly whispered, "The strongest." What followed was 40 years of war, as his generals tore the world apart between them. But here's the thing about what Alexander and Persia built together. Even broken, it changed everything. The Hellenistic Age spread Greek language, art, philosophy, and science across an enormous stretch of the ancient world. Alexandria became the greatest center of human knowledge in history. And the Greek language became the common tongue of the Mediterranean and the Middle East for centuries. The New Testament was written in Greek because of Alexander. The Romans modeled their empire on Hellenistic culture because of Alexander. When Islamic scholars preserved ancient knowledge through the medieval period, much of what they saved was Hellenistic because of Alexander. One man's obsession, born from a grudge 150 years old, shaped by his mother's stories of Achilles and his teacher's lessons about the world, rippled forward through 2,500 years of human civilization, and Persia endured. The culture Alexander tried to conquer outlasted his empire, his successors, and the entire Greek world that produced him. Persian art, Persian poetry, Persian science, all of it flowed forward, feeding the Islamic Golden Age, shaping the medieval world, echoing into our own. Two civilizations collided in the most violent way imaginable, and both of them left fingerprints on everything that came after. And honestly, when I sit with this story and really think about what it means, I can't help but see us in it. We live in a world that's more connected than ever before, more blended, more contested, where different civilizations, different ways of seeing the world, are constantly crashing into each other. In politics, in culture, in technology, in everything. And we're still asking the same questions Alexander asked. What do you do when you win? When you have the power, do you erase what came before, or do you try to understand it? Do you impose your way of seeing the world, or do you let yourself be changed by what you find? Alexander tried to do something genuinely radical. He didn't just want to defeat Persia. He wanted to merge worlds, to build something neither civilization could have built alone. He didn't fully succeed. He was too young, too reckless, too consumed by his own myth. His empire fell apart the moment he died. But the idea survived him. The idea that when two great civilizations meet, even in violence, even in fire, what comes out the other side can be something neither of them imagined. That's not just ancient history. That's the story we're still living,